Every writer is a minor god. With a pen for a wand and a blank page for a universe, we conjure beings from the void. We breathe into them the illusion of life, desire, pain, love, malice. We orchestrate their triumphs and their downfalls. And when the final period is placed, we close the book, and they cease to be. Or so we tell ourselves. Silas Thorne understood this divinity better than most. For 3 decades, he was the reigning prince of literary psychological horror. Not the horror of monsters under the bed, but of monsters within the mind. His villains were not mustache-twirling fiends, they were teachers, lovers, fathers, good people eroded by a single, fatal flaw, a gentle madness as one critic called it. Readers adored his tragedies, wept for his antagonists, and praised his profound humanism. They never stopped to wonder about the cost of such profound empathy. About where an author goes to mine such nuanced despair. The truth was, Silas Thorne was empty. A beautifully crafted, elegantly furnished shell. The well of his creativity, once a geyser, had dried up a decade ago. His last novel, The Grey Oblivion, had won awards but felt to him like an echo of an echo. Since then, nothing. The blank page, once a field of infinite possibility, had become a mocking, white desert. He was a retired god, living off the royalties of old creations in a tastefully silent apartment, haunted not by ghosts, but by the absence of them. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, the paper thick and creamy, the handwriting an obsessively precise copperplate. It was from a solicitor representing the estate of one Alastair Finch. Dear Mr. Thorne, I write at the instruction of the late Mr. Alastair Finch, your most devoted reader. Per his final wishes, you are cordially invited to reside at his estate, Blackwood, for a period not exceeding 1 month. Mr. Finch believed the atmosphere of Blackwood would be uniquely conducive to the completion of your unfinished manuscript, provisionally titled The Conscience of Ghosts. All expenses will be borne by the estate. Your agreement constitutes acceptance of a bequest detailed upon your arrival. Sincerely, etc. Silas's hands trembled. The Conscience of Ghosts. That was the book. The one that had broken him. A sprawling, ambitious novel he'd abandoned 10 years ago, midway through chapter 12, when the moral weight of the story, a sympathetic serial killer whose victims were themselves moral ghosts, people who had escaped earthly justice, became too much to bear. He had locked the manuscript away in a fireproof box, along with the guilt of its abandonment. How could a dead reader know its title? He'd never spoken of it. Never published a word. Curiosity, that most fatal of writerly traits, stirred the ashes of his dead ambition. A bequest? A devoted reader? A chance, perhaps, to conquer the white desert? It was a siren song he was too weary to resist. Blackwood was not a house, it was a geological event of grief built from local granite. It hunched on a cliff overlooking a cold, grey sea, surrounded by skeletal woods that whispered even on still days. The housekeeper, Mrs. Dove, was a woman of few words and eyes like chips of flint. She showed him to the study, a cathedral of a room, all dark oak and leaded glass, smelling of beeswax, old paper, and salt air. On the immense partner's desk lay 2 things. First, a sealed envelope with his name. Second, a familiar, battered leather folio. His heart stuttered. He opened the folio. There it was. His own handwriting, frozen in mid-sentence a decade ago, and in that moment, Henry understood that mercy was not a virtue, but the final, most exquisite form of cruelty. He lowered the sentence stopped. The page after was blank. The envelope contained a single sheet, same copperplate hand. Mr. Thorne. The bequest is simple, finish it. Here, in this room. Blackwood is a resonator. It will provide what you need. Fail to complete the work within 1 month, and the estate, along with a certain private correspondence regarding your research methods for your early work, will be transferred to the public domain. Welcome home. A cold knot tightened in his gut. Research methods. A euphemism for the unspoken pact he'd made in his youth. To write true horror, he hadn't just imagined pain, he had sought it out. The drunken confessions of broken men in dingy bars. The calculated manipulation of a grieving widow to understand loss. He had been a psychic vampire, feeding on real tragedy to fuel his fictions. He had thought it a noble sacrifice for his art. The letter threatened to expose him as the monster he secretly feared he was. He was trapped. By blackmail, by his own past, by the unfinished thing on the desk. The first night, he tried to write. The words were dead things, clichés marching to their graves. Frustrated, he threw the pen down and retired. In the deep, dead hours of the night, he awoke, certain he had heard a sound from the study. The soft, deliberate turn of a page. He found the study empty. But the manuscript was different. He had left it open at the unfinished sentence. Now, it was closed. And when he opened it, his blood froze. There, on the next blank page, in handwriting that was almost his, but off, more fluid, more assured, was a new line. Rope, but the face looking up at him was not that of the corrupt judge. It was his own. The face in the mirror every morning, shaving. The face of a man who judged and found himself wanting. Silas stumbled back. He hadn't written that. He wouldn't have written that. It was too, on the nose. Too aware. It spoke not as an author describing a character, but as the character commenting on the author. He spent the next day in a haze of denial. A prank by Mrs. Dove? Some elaborate literary critique machine? He drank brandy to quiet the shaking in his hands. As dusk bled into the study, he sat at the desk again, the manuscript before him like an accusation. The silence of Blackwood was different now. It was a listening silence. And then, he heard it. Not a sound, but a voice. Not in his ears, but in the space behind his eyes, in the part of his mind where his own characters used to speak to him. It was a man's voice, weary, intelligent, tinged with an infinite sadness. The voice of Henry, his serial killer. "You left us here, Silas." He gasped, knocking over the brandy glass. The voice was gone. In the middle of the thought. In the middle of the moral calculus. It returned, clearer now. "You gave me this conscience, this exquisite pain. And then you walked away. What was I supposed to do with it? Rot in a box? You're not real," Silas whispered to the empty room, his voice cracking. "You're a paragraph. A metaphor." "Metaphors hunger too," the voice replied, and now it held a sliver of ice. "You made me to ask the hard questions. Now I have one for you, Creator. What is the moral weight of abandoning a soul mid-sentence? Is it greater or lesser than the weight of taking a life? We have a month to decide. Together." The voice faded, leaving behind only the roar of the sea and the pounding of Silas Thorne's heart. He looked down at the manuscript. The new sentence still stared up at him. Below it, fresh ink was beginning to seep up through the paper from nowhere, forming the first curve of a new letter. He was not here to finish a book. He was here to stand trial. And the jury was composed of his own neglected children. This concludes part 1 of the Unwritten Book, The Summons of the Blank Page. The author has entered the story. And the story has been waiting a long, long time for him.